Well, here we are out again, and I have to say that it's dry and bright, which was completely different to what the forecasters said. Of course, anybody who lives in Britain will know that that can change in the space of half an hour. But we'll make the most of it while we can, because as I've said before, it's a lot easier going out in the dry and then getting rained on than it is actually stepping out of the door into the rain. Oh, here we go, a bit of flood water, which has become incredibly common this year because it has rained so much that even if we've had a dry spell and then it rains again, the ground is waterlogged and it just floods immediately. Remember when they said 18 months ago we had a couple of months of really hot weather, and they said this is it. Due to global warming, this is what summers are going to be like in Britain from now on. Hot weather and drought. And since then, it's rained non-stop. So even though we haven't had much of a summer, we are rapidly approaching winter. And the question is, how are you going to approach winter in terms of your cycling? Some people won't ride at all. Some people will put their bike in the garage or wherever they store it, and it'll stay there. My wife won't ride in winter. I hope we'll get one more good ride in before the end of this month, but then her bike won't go out again until March. And that's fine if you are a fair weather rider and that's what you like. There's no criticism of that, but it wouldn't work for me because I love riding. I want to be out every day. But there is that old expression, winter miles equals summer smiles. And all that means is that if you ride through the winter, you don't lose all your fitness. So you don't spend the first month of the summer building back up to where you were before. It means that you can go out on a group ride if you choose to do so early on in the year and keep up with everyone else. And other people, well, they're just going to put their bike on an indoor trainer and that's what they're going to do for the rest of the winter. And again, that's okay if that works for you. As I've said in a previous video, it doesn't work for me. I like being out. The problem with virtual reality is there's not very much reality. So if you are going to go out and ride through the winter, I'm going to share my tips. And just remember, I'm not a cycling coach. I'm by no means an expert. I'm just going to share what works for me. And your experience may be different. And one of the things, of course, if you live in Britain, as well as other parts of the world I know, one of the challenges, of course, is daylight. If you work anything close to office hours, now it's dark when you get up and it's dark when you go home, so it's much more difficult to go out on your bike. And this low winter sun, that does make life a bit more difficult. Because I can't really see where the potholes and things are. Of course, if you're in the southern hemisphere, you're going into summer. And let's be honest, where I come from in South Africa, there's not a whole lot of difference between winter and summer. And to a certain extent, there are times when that's true of South Wales. Although, for different reasons, it's not uncommon to have relatively mild but very wet winters in Wales. And you can find that it's fairly cool and quite rainy in the summer too, as it has been this year. So the first tip is that you're not made of sugar. You won't dissolve if you go out in the rain. As human beings, we're perfectly capable of functioning normally when we're wet. You may not like it, but you can do it. Look at the cows and the sheep in the fields. They're out in the rain, they're managing fine. And once you start concentrating on the ride, you sort of forget that you're wet. Unlike the cows and the sheep, you can have a shower. Get yourself warm and dry when you get home. Another tip I'll give you is they haven't yet invented a jacket that's both waterproof and breathable. They'll tell you they have, but in my experience it doesn't exist. You put on a waterproof jacket, by the time you get back you'll be just as wet from sweat as you would have been from the rain. I've tried a number of jackets that promise the world and don't deliver. I'm not suggesting you don't ride with a jacket. I'm just saying that make sure your expectations of what the jacket can do for you are realistic. And the times that I do wear a jacket is if it's cold and wet, because the jacket will keep the wind off the wet clothing that you're wearing and keep you a bit warmer, because that's kind of the worst thing of winter, is being cold and wet. There's nothing that will make you wish you'd stayed at home more than being cold and wet. And if it's really cold, you need to just dress up a bit warmer. You know what they say, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. But the one thing I will recommend is you do dress up warm. Coming from South Africa, I went out, first time I rode in a really cold day, thinking, well, it's fine, because, you know, the pedalling and everything else will warm me up and I'll be fine after a bit. And it was horrible. I had to cut the ride short. I was so cold and the pedalling didn't warm me up, and really you need to dress really warm and kind of keep that body heat in while you're out riding. But once I got the clothing sorted out, I quite enjoy going out on cold mornings. But that said, I don't go out when it's icy. And if you do go out when it's frosty, make sure you stick to main roads that have been treated. Icy roads and two wheels don't go well together. Another tip I'll give you is, in winter, I try and stay on cycle paths, particularly when it's rainy As I said, on frosty days, obviously that doesn't work because the cycle paths could be icy. And when it's rainy, and it's quite often gloomy and rainy, it makes it more difficult for cars to see you, and they're already pretty impatient as it is. So make sure you've got a good set of lights, bright clothing, but as I said, try and stay off the roads and on cycle paths wherever possible. And the other time I tend not to go out is when you have really bad winds. In Britain they have a 3-colour weather warning: yellow, amber and red. Generally an amber and red is what you want to avoid. I find yellow warnings are really okay, as long as you check the wind direction and so on. You usually ride okay in those, but amber and red, stay at home. And that's really just a safety thing. It's not that it's hard work riding into the wind, that's just part of cycling. It's the fact that you can get blown off your bike or blown into traffic. And I've said it before, one of the biggest problems with winter riding is finding the motivation. And the easiest way to get yourself motivated is to set yourself realistic tasks. If you set yourself a task of a 30-mile ride, and you get up in the morning and the rain's battering the window, and it's all gloomy, you think, oh, I don't want to do 30 miles in this. So you close the curtains and go back to sleep. My target for winter riding was 5 miles. I always do more than that. If you set yourself a target of 5 miles, then it's quite easy. Because you go, 5 miles, I'll be back in next to no time. And I can be back in the warm and dry. And then that's the motivation you need to put your kit on, get your bike out. Once you're out, you go, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought. And then you end up going further. And in the winter, it's just about riding, keeping your fitness. So don't try and attack any KOMs or PRs, because that also put pressure on you. Unless, of course, you want to cheat and do a PR on a section of road with a 20-knot tailwind. But generally, just tell yourself, I'm just going out and riding the bike. Doesn't matter how slow I am. And again, that just takes pressure off you. I can't tell you how many times I've gone out in the rain and filled with dread and thinking, oh God, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this today. And then I come back and I had the most enjoyable ride. It's far better to be out riding a bike than sitting in a chair watching the rain beating against the window. And if you do go out and the weather's worse than you thought, and after a mile you have to turn around and go home, you've lost nothing. But you've gained the satisfaction of knowing that you made the effort